Hello everybody and welcome back to the second shelf and to another Books Weekly, my Sunday video in which I discuss books that I've either finished from a previous week or read last week or started last week. And to start with very briefly about the book that I've started last week, Judith Schalansky, German author, The Giraffe's Neck, Der Hals der Giraffe. I haven't finished that book because it's in the wrong place. That's what you get when you have two houses in two cities and no brains. You leave books in the wrong place and you can't read them. So on to the books that I did read last week. And the first one was Zinzi Clemmons, What We Lose. This is a book that I've started quite some time ago, or at least I showed it in a Books Weekly, I think a month ago or something. But then I put it down because I had to write a review for it and I wanted to read it closer to the date that the review was due. Zinzi Clemmons is a young American author. She did an MFA program at Columbia, and the book started there actually because Zinzi Clemmons' mother was diagnosed with terminal breast cancer while Clemmons was at Columbia, and Clemmons moved home to care for her mother or to help her father care for her mother. And while she was there, she decided to abandon the novel she was working on and instead write about the illness and the death of her mother. So that is the starting point of the book. But the book is, as you can see somewhere, here, it's a novel. So what she did is then she took fictional character, Tandy, a young woman whose mother was diagnosed with terminal breast cancer, and added a fictional story, the life story of Tandy. The book is written from Tandy's perspective in a non-linear structure. So we go back and forth to Tandy's youth, her struggles with her mother about her hair, and to the time of the illness, and beyond that, the men Tandy met at high school, university. At a certain point, she meets a man called Peter, whom she marries. She gets pregnant. And also inserted into the book are little vignettes, almost like blog posts about all kinds of subjects. For instance, this one is about ghosts. A short one, if you can see here, this one, there's a short note about ghosts. She also includes some newspaper articles about Winnie Mandela, for instance, the trial that Winnie Mandela went through. So it's not your regular linear structured novel. It reads actually much more like a memoir, but that's of course also probably because you know as a reader that Zinzi Clemmons' mother died from breast cancer and that she shares a lot of other aspects of Tandy's life. Tandy, like Zinzi Clemmons, has a mother from South Africa, so-called colored, mixed-raced mother, and a black father living in America, being quite wealthy. The school she goes to is the same as Zinzi Clemmons. So it's very hard to distinguish whether this is really a novel, and maybe it would have worked better if it had been, labeled a memoir. Because even though this book has been, going around BookTube a lot, and a lot of people really, really loved it, I thought it wasn't a good book, and certainly not a good novel. But because my view certainly also is subjective, I will leave a link to a very positive review, and that's the review from Olive over at Book Olive down below in the description, so that if you are interested in reading the book, certainly because it's been going around so much, you can also, after watching my negative review, watch a positive review and make up your own mind. I thought it was not a good book for various reasons. First of all, I thought the character of Tandy was very one-dimensional. It never exceeded the cardboard cliche character. I felt a lot of times as if Tandy was straight out of Sex and the City, but without the fun and the humor and the exuberance of somebody like Samantha in Sex and the City. We see a lot of cliched buzzword statements about relationships, about marriage, and I never had the feeling that Tandy was a real person, except maybe for once or twice in the novel when Tandy talks about caring for her terminally ill mother. There were moments when you thought, well, maybe this is going somewhere, but they were really very brief. The other thing that I really didn't like, I thought for a novel, there was just no character development, no plot arc. It stayed with, like I said earlier, buzzword statements, little vignettes that are, nice enough, and certainly open enough, because there's a lot of topics that Tandy talks about in these little vignettes: race and gender and politics and Obama and Winnie Mandela and national identity and ghosts and grief. And so all these statements, like I said, they read nice enough. But in the end, I thought it was rather banal what she wrote and what she talked about. And there was never a moment that I had the feeling there is more to it than just, a nice, interesting newspaper clipping. Oh, let's use that. Let's add that. So that was my second point, that I didn't find any development or any depth or any, let alone a plot arc, because there's virtually no plot. But that's a personal grief, because I don't like plotless novels. And the last thing was the writing, because that can, take a book that is maybe not very good from various points of view, but if the writing is just spectacular, then you might still think the book is good. But the writing was nothing spectacular. It was not bad. I mean, the sentences made sense, but it was a quite flat and for me rather boring style in writing. There was nothing. There was no depth in the writing either. That the metaphors or images that were used, I thought were very cliched as well. So no plot for me to hang on to. I didn't think the writing was anything special. And my main grief was that I thought the character was really one-dimensional, not believable as a character. And, a novel has to make sense. Life doesn't have to make sense, but a novel has to make sense. And I think that this mixture of taking a memoir-like personal experience, a very tragic personal experience like the loss of your mother when you're fairly young, and then trying to add this fictional plot about Tandy's life with her various mans and jobs and dinners and trips to South Africa. I thought it just didn't work, and it would have been probably much better to just leave out the whole Tandy story and focus on the memoir part and make something of that. So I gave it what I hardly ever do, but I gave it 1 star on Goodreads, because I thought as a novel it was really a failure. But as I mentioned earlier, I'm in the minority here, and if you want to have a look at a really, really thoughtful, very good review, then check out Olive's review that I mentioned before. And if you don't know her channel, subscribe. That speaks for itself. The next book I want to talk to you about, I will talk about only very briefly, because it's one of the Man Booker long-listed books, and that's Kamila Shamsie, Home Fire. The novel came out recently, mid-August, and is a retelling of the Antigone myth. I will leave a link to the Antigone myth down below. You can check it out. I thought it was a really good book. But I'm not going to talk at length here, because I want to make separate review videos of the Man Booker books I read. So you have to wait for that. The next book I want to talk to you about is Chloe Benjamin, The Anatomy of Dreams, published in 2014. This was Benjamin's debut novel. Benjamin is a young American writer who also did an MFA. She's born in San Francisco, and then she did an MFA program, as obviously all young writers do. That's the thing to do, I guess. And she now lives in Madison, Wisconsin, and her new book, The Immortalists, will come out in January next year. I came across The Anatomy of Dreams also on Olive's channel. I've heard about The Immortalists, but haven't heard of her debut novel, and Olive really praised it, and I read it and I thought she was right, which only goes to show that you can absolutely deeply disagree with the same person on one book and agree with that person on another book. The Anatomy of Dreams tells the story of Sylvie and Gabe. Sylvie and Gabe meet in high school in a boarding school setting, and they fell in love. They become a couple, and then Gabe all of a sudden disappears. They meet again years later, but the central story is not so much about their relationship, even though it's a big part of the story, how their relationship evolves. But the main part is their involvement in with a neuroscientist, Adrian Keller, and in his research. Keller researches dreams, especially people with sleeping disorders, so people with night terrors or nightmares, or people who sleepwalk and then do things without being conscious, without knowing that they do things. And what he wants to do is he wants to find a way to make people with these disorders lucid while they sleep, so that they can access the subconscious consciously. The research doesn't go the way he or Gabe and Sylvie anticipated. There's quite some stuff going wrong, and especially Sylvie, her involvement into the research ends up being quite harrowing. That's about all I want to tell you about the plot, because otherwise you will be spoiled, and there is a plot twist about 2/3 through. But the main theme, what we learn between 1999, when the novel starts, and they meet, and 2010, is what happens between the three people, Keller and Gabe and Sylvie, and the research. And there's also another couple involved from a certain point on, the neighbors, Jenna and Tom, and they get involved, especially Tom gets involved in the dream research as well. I thought it was really interesting, and certainly a good book for a debut novel, because the theme, what does it mean when we dream? How can we access our dreams in a way that are not only subconscious? And are you responsible for doing things? For instance, if you have the sleep disorder of sleepwalking, and you hit somebody while you're sleepwalking, are you responsible for that? Can you access what you learn or do or say while you sleepwalk when you wake up the next morning? So I thought this was really interesting, not only from a scientific point of view, but also morally, especially morally. And there are a lot of moral questions asked by Benjamin in this novel. So I really enjoyed it. I can certainly recommend it, and I'm looking forward to Benjamin's new book in January. And then just only one sentence about the book that I'm about to start, because that's N.K. Jemisin The Stone Sky, the third book in the Broken Earth series, which just came out a week ago. And I'm anticipating, because I really love that series and I want to know how the series ends, but I'm also a little bit hesitant, because often the ending of a series is not good and then you are like, meh. But we'll see. I will report back when I read The Stone Sky. So this was it for my Books Weekly this Sunday. I hope you've enjoyed it. Thank you very much for watching. As always, talk to me in the comments or find me on other social media, which I link down below, and enjoy the rest of your Sunday. I'll talk to you soon in my next video. Bye-bye.